Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the HLS Jog Paper 1 walkthrough for GCSE EdXLB Geography. So what I'm going to do here is spend quite a lot of time going through Paper 1. First off, we're going to look at the actual paper. This is the paper from last academic year, so this is actually May 2018. So we're going to use this as kind of like our basis of this walkthrough. So what I'm going to do is just go through the actual paper first, have a look at the different questions, and also just kind of pinpoint the command words in those questions. So we'll get a feel for the actual paper. After that, I've got a PowerPoint presentation in which we'll go through some generic advice for this paper. And then after that, we'll move into kind of like the third section of this walkthrough, which is to then actually work through some questions themselves. I'll model some and I'll show you some actual answers provided by the exam board. So first off, this is the actual paper. When you start your exam, just to a note here that this exam is an hour and a half. And first thing you should do at the start of any exam is just have a look at the actual instructions, information, and advice. So first off, you should be writing in black pen. We should be aware of that. This one's important here. It asks you in the questions, if it asks you to show all your working out, make sure that you do that. You will drop marks otherwise. Going down here, you can see that this exam is worth 94 marks. For each question, that the marks are actually shown in brackets at the end, which we should be obviously comfortable with, and that there are marks for spelling, punctuation, and grammar, and the use of specialist terminology. And the questions where you get SPAG and specialist terminology marks are identified in the paper. And that's pretty much it. But I would just suggest that we always read all this information at the beginning of every paper. Let's just go through the actual paper. We can see that we've got section A here, which is on hazardous earth. And this is a multiple choice question, and the command word is identify. All I'm going to do first, fly through the paper and just identify command words. And then we'll get into a bit more generic advice here. Next question, multiple choice, state. Next, we've got a 2-marker, and it's an explain question. Another multiple choice, sorry about that, identify. Moving on, we've got an analyze question here. Well, no, it says analyze the actual figure, but the actual command word is describe. Keep going. Next one, we've got an explain question. Down here to a multiple choice identify question. We've got a resource-based question here, and this command word is suggest. Moving on, next question, we've got an explain. Another explain question here. And then we've got the 8-marker, and we've got a evaluate question, and here is a marker. Let's keep going. And now we're into section B, which we can see. Section B is our development dynamics. We've got a definition question here, multiple choice definition, another multiple choice here, into an explain question, another explain question, 2 calculate questions, an explain question. We've got another calculate question here, describe question, another explain question, and an evaluate question. That is the end of the second section, section B, and then we're going to go into section C. Here it is, section C, and this is challenges of an urbanizing world. State multiple choice, state 1 marker, another explain question for 2. Then we've got some resources, followed by a 3-mark question, describe, a 4-marker on suggest. We've got a calculate, an explain. Moving towards the end of the paper here, we've got a state, and then an explain, and then this is going to go into our last 8 marker for the paper, which is assess. Now, All I've done there is gone through the paper, the 3 sections, and we've just kind of pinpointed the command words. You should all be doing that. Question by question, always pinpoint the command word. Always highlight, box it, circle it, underline it, however you work, but ensure that you know what the command word is per question. What I'm going to do now is give you some general advice, and then we can come back to the paper and we're going to start modeling and answering some of these questions. And I'll make sure that I've gone through every different type of question on this paper. Okay, so here we go. We've got my paper 1 walkthrough guide, and as I said at the start, this is for EdXLB GCSE Geography. Okay, first off, just to point out here, there are marks on the paper for maths and statistical skills, and that makes up 10% of the whole assessment. Now, if you go to the internet and just stick into Bing or into Chrome, HLS Geog, as I have done here, that'll come up with the HLS Geography YouTube channel. Load this up and you can see that we are doing amazingly well with 56 subscribers. You know, hit it, and then hit on playlists. And for anyone who is struggling a little bit in terms of maths and general geographical skills, we have added some new playlists here. First off, we've got a playlist for every single topic. So there are 3 playlists here relevant to this topic. You've got your hazardous earth playlist. There is a development dynamics playlist over here. And we've also got a challenges of an urbanizing world playlist here. Now, maths wise, I've got a GCSE maths playlist, if I can locate it. Here it is. So GCSE Geography Maths, 9 videos on there, and those 9 videos go through everything you need maths wise for your geography papers. And there's also a geographical skills playlist here that is relevant for all 3 papers. I make sure that I've watched these, and that I'm comfortable with these before paper 1, 2, and 3. Right, moving back to the PowerPoint presentation here then. So, maths and statistical skills make up 10%. Moving on. So, just to point out here, which I have just said, this is the overview for GCSE Geography. This is paper 1, this is paper 2, and this is paper 3. So we're going to concentrate first on this section. So everything I'm saying right now in this walkthrough is here. So just to point out that this exam is 1 hour and 30 minutes. All your exams are 1 hour 30 minutes. It's worth 37.5%. That's the same amount for paper 2. Paper 3 is actually worth less. And it's worth 94 marks overall. So 3 sections. Section A is how it's referred to on the paper, is hazardous earth. And that is your tectonic hazards, which is your earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and tsunamis. And you've got tropical storms as well. Section B is development dynamics, and that includes a case study of an emerging country, which we should all be aware of, is India. And you should be learning that for your exam from your case study booklets. And then section C is challenges of an urbanizing world, and that is a case study of a megacity in a developing or emerging country. For yourselves, it's emerging, and this is your Mumbai case study. Okay, so we've got 3 sections on this paper. Moving on, we can see it refers to paper 1 here, and we've got section A, B, and C, as I've just mentioned, and there's 30 marks for section A, 34 for section B, and 30 for section C. You should be spending 30 minutes on each section. It's an hour and a half, 3 sections, half an hour each. Make sure at the start of the exam, you look at when you started the exam, when it ends, and chunk up that time. I'd actually note it on my actual test at what time I should be on to section B, at what time I should be on to section C. One of the major things the exam board said in terms of their feedback after the first year of this new specification being examined is the amount of students that were running out of time, especially on the 8 marker. And you can see there is an 8 marker on each of these sections. It is critical that you answer those 8 markers in depth. And if you are struggling time-wise and you do not leave enough time, especially for that last 8 marker, it will really undermine your overall marks in this paper. So plan out your time, know at what point you should be on the last section, i.e. an hour into your exam, you should be starting that. And just to notice over here, which I've just said, we've got 3 8 markers, but there's an extra 4 marks for spelling, punctuation, and grammar, and use of specialist terminology. Next here, this is just a breakdown of the 4 assessment objectives, AO1, 2, 3, and 4, used throughout these 3 papers. The percentage splits over here, 15, 25, 35, and 25. And you can see that AO1 is your ability to demonstrate knowledge of locations, places, processes, and environments. AO2 is more about your ability to bring this together. So bring your knowledge together in terms of concepts and interrelationships. AO3 is your ability to apply knowledge to interpret, analyze, and evaluate geographical information and ultimately make some judgments. And then AO4 is your ability to select, adapt, and use a variety of skills and techniques to investigate questions and issues. In terms of this paper, paper 1, you can see that the larger percentage in terms of AO1 to 4 distribution is on AO2. So that is, moving back, our ability to show our understanding of concepts and interrelationships between our subject knowledge. Question types on this paper go from multiple choice questions through to shorter open responses, i.e. 1 markers, open responses such as 2 and 4 marks, suggest and explain questions, some calculating questions, as well as the extended open responses, which are your 8 markers. We saw these when I went through the paper earlier. On this slide here, you can see what the different command words actually mean. I would recommend right now you pause the video and you just read down these to make sure that you're comfortable with them. I'm going to speak about explain, suggest, and assess and evaluate in more detail. There is no select and justify on this paper. That is only on paper 3. But what I would like to point out is compare. If you get a compare question, you must find the similarities and differences between 2 elements given in a question. So whatever the question is, if you get the word compare in your answer, you must give both, and you says it here, you must give both elements and include a statement of their similarity and difference, i.e. you get compare, make sure you talk about similarities and differences. Do both. Here you can see down the side, we've got the different command words, and then it shows you how many marks that these are worth. So for example, I was just talking about compare. These are only worth 3 marks, i.e. you need to give 3 similarities and differences, okay, and make sure you've done both. You've got a similarity and a difference within that answer. And you can see that the higher marks on paper 1, because we don't have a select and justify, are the evaluate and assess 8 markers, which I'm going to talk a lot more about. Here's just the distribution of the 8 markers. So this is paper 1, and our paper 1 8 markers are split between 4 marks on AO2, understanding, and your application of that for another 4 marks on AO3. Okay, this is just the structure of the exam summarized for you for paper 1. Pause it here if you so wish to have a quick little read of the overview. I have just referred to this in the previous slides. Okay, stop there. This here is the exam structures that you've seen all academic year, and if you are watching this video after the first year of me recording this, you'll have probably seen this for 2 or 3 years of your Key Stage 4 experience at Higher Lane Geography. Now, before your your paper 1 exam, you must have learned these structures. For this exam, you need to know all of these except justify. Justify is not on paper 1, it's on paper 3 only. But everything else is on paper 1. Please ensure that you know your OO structure for evaluate, your T structure for distribution, you're aware of the difference between describe and explain, and you've learned your assess structure. I'm going to refer back to this. Okay, from this point onwards, I'm going to go through different types of questions. I'll do a little bit of modeling, and then we'll actually unpick it on the actual exam paper itself. So first off, a little bit between the differences between explain and suggest. So here you can see that explain and suggest can both be worth 2 marks, 3 marks, or 4 marks. So you may get explain or suggest one factor or one cause for 2 marks, and explain suggest another one cause or factor or idea for 3 marks, or explain suggest 2 ideas, 2 factors, 2 causes for 4 marks, i.e. this is one developed point, 1 point developed twice, 2 different points developed once. Okay, let's have a look at the difference then. So we've got down here, explain, and over here, suggest. Okay, so the differences between them. Here we can see it says explain is used when the student is required to provide a reasoned explanation of how or why something occurs by developing a point with some justification. Okay. Over here, suggest is only used when the question requires students to speculate beyond the learned content of the speculation and will link to a resource. Okay. In this type of question, it is not expected that the candidate has any prior knowledge at all of a particular geographical context of location, but can provide a reasoned explanation of how or why something may have occurred. Okay, let's explain this. Both are answered very similar. You're going to make a point and develop it using key phrases. This means that as a result. The difference is explain questions may or may not use a resource. It may ask you to look at a resource, it may not, okay? However, suggest always will use a resource. They will give you a resource of a place you've never heard of, okay? And they want you to look at it, use your subject knowledge, okay, to explain what you can see in the resource. Let's have a look at that. I'll actually model some answers here. Give me a second as I just move over to the visualizer. Okay. Okay. So I've got an explain question here. And like I've said in my explanation at the start, we should always just circle or underline our command word. So our command word is explain, and it's worth 2 marks. That means for 2 marks, okay, I must make a point and I must develop it. And I'm going to develop it in geography using the key phrases. This leads to, or this means that, or as a result. Okay. Now, you can see that it's not a suggest question, and therefore we don't have a resource here. Explain may or may not have a resource. Okay, explain one cause of a tsunami. I'm going to use the language of the question to begin my answer. One cause of a tsunami is underwater earthquakes at destructive plate boundaries. So far, all I've done is made a point. I need to develop it now using one of these key phrases. This means that there is a large release of energy causing the displacement of water, i.e. our tsunami wave. So here I've got my key phrase, this means that. I've got my initial point here, there's one mark, and I've developed it, there's my second mark. So that's explain. Okay, let's do some examples again, but this time we're going to look at suggest. Okay, I've got a question here that says Haiti appears to be very, very vulnerable to the impacts of Hurricane Matthew. Make sure before you sit paper one, you are comfortable and confident with the word vulnerable. Using figure 3, suggest, so there's my command word, suggest 2 reasons why. It's worth 4 marks. So this time, for 4 marks, I'm going to have times 2 developed points. And that's quite obvious because it's broken it down into 1 and 2. But importantly here, it suggests, which means that I have to use the figure. It tells me anyway to use figure 3. So if I turn it over, here's figure 3. Okay, when you get a resource in the exam like this, the examiner has chose this on purpose. They're trying to get you to apply your subject knowledge to this figure. They know you don't know anything about this location or don't expect you to know this location in detail, but they want you to apply your knowledge to it. I would always suggest you unpick the resource. So if we look, I can see here, it's telling me about the area, okay, of hurricane force winds before the 3rd of October, which I can see is this area here. It's showing me the possible range of predicted storm paths, which is all of this here. I can see on the resource, it's pointed out USA, the Bahamas, Cuba, and Haiti. It's given me the compass directions over here. It's showing me the predicted path of the tropical storm. It's told me when they're going to get there, Tuesday the 4th, Wednesday the 5th, Thursday the 6th, Friday the 7th of October. And it's given me some information here on these 4 countries, which if I move down, they've gone into more detail. I've got USA, Haiti, the Bahamas. It's told me GDP per capita, so on average how much money is earned, okay, in these countries in a year. And it's told me how much in US dollars. Human Development Index measures, okay, how developed a country is between 0 to 1, 1 being the most developed. And it uses 3 different factors. 1 is your life expectancy, which is basically a measure of health. 2 is also GDP per capita, a measurement of wealth. And 3, mean years of schooling, which is education. Therefore, this suggest question wants us to use these figures in our answer. So when you get a resource like this, spend time breaking it down like I just did. So here we go. It's asking me, why is Haiti vulnerable? So I'm going to look at the resource and pick something out that shows weaknesses for Haiti. And what I can see here is that Haiti has the lowest GDP per capita by far, $761. So I'm going to use the language of the question again. Haiti is very vulnerable as its GDP per capita is only, let me double check, $761, full stop. Remember what I said is I need 2 developed points, which means I, again, need to be using key phrases to develop my points, which must be this leads to, this means that, or as a result. So let's develop it. As a result, the population are less able to afford housing that can withstand tropical storms. Okay, you can see that I've developed the point here with as a result. This is going to get 1 mark. This is going to get me a 2nd mark. And just to point out here, we can clearly see that I've referenced the figure and it asks us to use the figure. Let's do another one. Haiti, again, I'm going to use the language of the question, is very vulnerable as its HDI is only, let's have a look, it's down here, there it is, 0.48. 0.48. Again, I need to develop my point. Remember, we need 2 developed points. This is 1 developed point, so I need a key phrase. I'm going to use as a result this time. Oh no, let's use a different one. This means that. This means that the population are less likely to be educated regarding preparation for a tropical storm. Okay, and we can highlight again my key phrase. So I've developed my point. My initial point gets me a mark. My second point, so I've developed the initial point, that gets me a 2nd mark. Overall, that is 4 out of 4. Again, let's highlight. It asks me to use figure 3, and you can see I have used explicitly material from figure 3. Make sure you do that. Below this, we've got another explain question. So again, I'm just going to, as I go through the exam, I'm going to be picking out my command words. This time, it mentions the GIS, and if you don't know what a GIS map is, look at the Geographical Skills playlist on HLS Jog YouTube. Make sure you know what that is because they refer to it a lot, especially in paper 1. So figure 3 includes a GIS map. But this question doesn't ask me to use it, okay? It refers to what it is here, but it's not actually asking me to use it. Difference again between suggest and explain. So it says, explain 2 ways a map such as these can help countries to prepare for tropical storms. 4 marks, explain question, again, means I need to make 2 developed points. We can see that because we've got 1, 2. And again, I need to use key phrases like this leads to, this means that, and as a result. So explain 2 ways a map such as these can help countries prepare for tropical storms. These maps, I should have used other color pen to keep it with black. Apologies. These maps show the speed of, these maps show the speed the storm is moving because it shows me the dates on there. We can see that on the map. So even though it doesn't say I have to use the resource, there's a lot of clues in the resource to help you get answers. That's going to get me a mark. Now I need to develop it. So I'm going to pick one of my key phrases. This means that the population can be given accurate predictions of when the storm will impact. Again, let's highlight key phrase. This means that initial point is now developed, second point, 2 marks. Do another one of these. These maps show the predicted path of the storm. Again, I'm just taking clues and information from the resource. It tells me the predicted path. That's got me a mark. I need to go back. I need a developed point. I need to use a key phrase. As a result, the government knows which areas to evacuate. Highlight my key phrase here. As a result, initial point developed, second point, there is 2 marks. So I've got 1, 2 marks, 1 developed point, second developed point. Overall, that is 4 out of 4. Okay, let's move back now to the actual PowerPoint, and we'll come back to modeling of some answers in a little bit. Okay, so that was explain and suggest questions. And let's move on now. The next command word structure that we need to be confident with and comfortable with in the exam is assess. Give me a second. Okay, so let's go through assess then. So assess is used, as we can see here, for the extended writing questions, basically their essays. And you can see that the exam board, and this is taken from the exam board, they are saying that the student is required to use evidence from located examples or case studies. You have 9 case studies. They expect you to reference these in assess questions. They also expect you to do the following. They expect you to consider all the factors within that assess question and identify which are the most important. And that's why in class, your teacher's been telling you in assess questions to rank them. Which is the most important, second, and least important. And let's move on, sorry. So here we go then, some more information on assess. So we got a question here. Study figure 9. Assess the environmental impacts of exploiting Indonesia's energy resources. So the exam board is saying that for assess, you must use the evidence to determine the relative significance. Basically, significance means importance of something having considered a range of relevant information, okay? So what that means is assess questions are looking for you to come up with 3 different ideas, okay? Each idea is going to be a paragraph. So idea 1, 1 paragraph, idea 2, second paragraph, idea 3, third paragraph. The 3 different ideas, okay, will relate to the exam question, and you're going to be seeing which one is the most important, second least important in terms of the exam question, then making a little mini conclusion, a final judgment. I recommend that you all follow this structure, not this structure, sorry, this way of going about unpicking the assess question. First off, I would box, underline, or highlight the command word. Clearly, this is an assess question, so you'd be underlining, boxing, highlighting, assess. Secondly, I would box, underline, or highlight the key factor, if given. Sometimes they don't give you one, a lot of the time they do. Okay, if it's there, find it, underline it. Third, I would box, underline, or highlight the key geographical phrase. There will be a phrase in the question that the examiner wants you to keep coming back to. So every single point you make, and you're going to make 3 developed points, 3 paragraphs, 3 ideas, 3 factors. Each one you must keep bringing back, keep linking back to the key geographical phrase of the question. I would also recommend, number 4, that you plan what your 2 other factors are going to be. What does that mean? Well, look here, number 2, they should have given you 1 key factor. That's going to be one of your paragraphs. But you need 2 other paragraphs, 2 other ideas, 2 other factors. So I would just annotate what your other 2 factors could be. Here's an exam question at the bottom, okay? For a named emerging country, now assess how far its development has been influenced by its location. So, first off, assess, number 1 is our command word. So I've done number 1. Number 2, where's the key factor? Okay, so I'm going to have a look here, and there it is, its location. So it wants me to discuss that factor. That's going to be one of my paragraphs, okay? Number 3, find the key geographical phrase, okay? So there it is. I'm just going to wiggle line it. How far its development. So what it wants me to do is to keep going back to development. So it's asking me, how far do I agree that its location, okay, has developed that country? So the country, named emerging country, we've only studied one. This would be India. So the question's saying, come up with 3 ideas, 3 things, okay, that have influenced the development of India, okay? The development is the key geographical phrase, the key geographical idea it wants you to refer to in your answer. And it's told me that I must talk about location. There's 1 factor that I need to talk about, but I need to come up with 2 more. So I'm going to quickly annotate that I'm thinking, what have I been taught about India that has influenced its development? So I might talk about, as another factor, I could talk about colonialism. It was part of the British Empire. And then the third factor I might introduce myself might be globalization. So there's my 3 factors. Key factor, what I've been told to use, its location. And then I'm going to bring in globalization and colonialism. And then I'm going to think about these 3 and how far do I agree or how far do I think that they've influenced the development of India. Let's break this down more. For each paragraph, we're going to follow the Peel structure. So paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, all Peel. You must follow this. So here's the Peel structure in geography. over here, I've put what the Peel, part of Peel means. So what does the P, E, E, and L mean? Pause right now so you can have a read of this. So the P is the point, and this is where you introduce your idea and you make sure it links to the key geographical phrase. This bit here, number 3. The evidence, that is you providing evidence from the resource. So if it says to refer to a resource, use the resource. Otherwise, you must use your case study knowledge. You then go on, E is for explanation, and you explain the evidence you've just provided. And the fourth one, is your link. You link back to the key geographical phrase. So in this question, it would be back to how far it's influenced development. And you must say how significant that point is. Below this, I'll put some sentence starters to help. So in terms of your point, your 3 paragraphs, I personally would go with point 1 or paragraph 1. I would start it with the most important point or factor is. I would just structure it like this. I think it's a nice, straightforward way to do it. I then go into my second paragraph, starting that point with the second most important point is, and then my third one would be the least important. That would be my sentence starters, my 3 paragraphs. In terms of each paragraph, you're going to do your point, and then you're going to do evidence E. And I would use the phrase, this is evident by. Then quote resource, information, data, quote from the resource, or this is going to be you quoting your subject knowledge of your case studies. And try to use specific facts from your case study here. I would then use a key phrase. This means that as a result to explain your evidence. And then I would use this phrase. This is something significant because. What do I mean by that? Well, this is back to this snake that we referred to in class. The blank is the snake. Weigh up how important, and that's what significant means, is importance. So how important is the point you've just made overall in terms of, again, that key, number 3, that key geographical phrase? Okay, so you're going to say maybe that the point is minimally important. And obviously, if we're thinking back to your structure, you're probably going to be using these sort of phrases for the point that you think is the least most important. And then the phrases further up the snake for the ones that you think are more important. So here, let's say that this was my 3rd paragraph. I'd probably be saying that that point was minimally or quite or averagely important or significant, either word. And then maybe for my point that I thought was the most important, I'm going to be using a phrase like massively or largely important. And then the because bit is a sentence or 2 where you make a judgment. So overall, why would you say that point was massively important? Overall, why would you say that point was minimally important? And here you must link back to the key geographical phrase, which I've said here. But also, I've got some ideas here to help. So when you're thinking about how important that point is, could you link it to some key geographical concepts? And remember, we've said how important concepts and interrelationships are in AO2 for this particular paper. Could you say that that point is sustainable or maybe unsustainable? Okay, maybe you're saying it's massively important because it's sustainable, or maybe you're saying it's minimally important because it's unsustainable. Could you link your point to aspects of social geography, quality of people's lives, to economic geography, to the creation of wealth, environmental geography, to nature, or maybe to political geography? Okay, this is massively important because politically X, Y, Z. Maybe your point is only important in the short term. Maybe your point is important in the long term. What about stakeholders or players, people affected by issues that we study in geography? So think maybe rich or poor people. Does your point play a particular role or have a particular impact on rich people or poor people or others? Okay, this is quite a naive way of looking at it. So could you talk about maybe local residents, okay, indigenous people, CEOs, okay, and so forth. Now, is your point reversible so it can be put back, or is it non-reversible and permanent? So, for example, we've made a permanent change to our climate with global warming. Okay, it's non-reversible, so that it would make my point pretty significant, important. What about your point? Does it have an impact just on a local area, regional, national, global? That could determine how important the point is. Okay. And lastly, what about just severity of whatever you've talked about? Is it really severe or less severe? So these are just ideas to help you to think about how important that point is you've made. Okay, let's kind of flow diagram this. So in terms of answering the assess question, you're going to have your first factor, whatever you think is most important is going to be your first paragraph. Then you're going to go into your second factor, your second most important, paragraph 2. Factor 3 is your least important, third paragraph, and then I want you to make a mini conclusion. Make an overall judgment and link it back to the question. Every single paragraph 1, 2, and 3 must be Peel. I must have this, and evidence must be there for each paragraph. Lastly, I would like you to use a reflexive phrase, okay, at the beginning of each paragraph. I want you to use it for paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. Use one of these before you say the most important, and then the second most, third most, okay, and overall. Use one of these, just start each paragraph. So, for example, on the other hand, the second most important factor is, however, the least important factor is, and then your conclusion, use something like in conclusion. I would always say to use in conclusion. This will look good to the examiner because it shows the examiner you're weighing and evaluating your assess points up. Okay, moving on. Last thing for assess here, I'm going to help a little bit more with the L part of Peel. And some of us might still be struggling with this idea of the snake and also with these ideas of how to think about your point being important. And you might be struggling with working out which is most important to least important anyway. So I've got some ideas to work through here. Okay, here we go. So I've got 2 exam questions, exam style questions, but clearly they're not for geography. All right, so here's my first one. All right, let's say we've got this question. For animated Disney films, assess that the villain is the reason for their success. So I've underlined assess because back to what I've asked us to do here, I'm going to go command word, key factor, key geographical phrase. Obviously, I'm applying it to this Disney question. I've got my command word. Okay, my key factor is the villain. I've been told I must talk about that. And then next, my key phrase here is their success. So I'm going to weigh up my 3 different ideas, my 3 factors against the success of a Disney film. Now, I've been given 1 factor, the villain, so I need to come up with 2 more factors. I've got 1. I need a second factor and a third factor that I could explain in terms of the success of a Disney film. So I think that sidekicks are pretty important to a successful Disney film. And I also think the storyline is as well. Okay. Now, below here, you can see I've put the words from the snake in this kind of table here. And this is a way for you to kind of visualize, okay, the idea of coming up with 3 ideas or 3 factors and weighing them up. Assess questions are basically about weighing up 1 idea, a second idea, and a third idea, deciding which one is the most, second, and least important in terms of whatever that key phrase is. So I'm basically thinking, how far do I think that the villain is important to the success of a Disney film? How far do I think sidekicks are the reason for a successful Disney film? And how far do I agree that that the storyline is the reason for a successful Disney film? So if I was to do this, I've got down here the storyline, and this would be my first paragraph, and I think that the storyline is extremely important. And then here I've got sidekicks. I think sidekicks are substantially important. And lastly, I've got villain, and I think the villains are only partially important. So I've made a bar graph, and you can see that I've weighed up and I've used a word here to show how important I think each is in terms of that key phrase about the success of a Disney film. And I'm going to have to put some evidence in there to be able to, in my peel paragraph, I need evidence, and then I need a link back to the question and make a judgment. Okay, I've done this to show you I'm making judgments by putting in the answer that I think storylines are extremely important to the success of a Disney film. I'm making a judgment to the examiner that allow you to get into top level marks. And my evidence here is going to be that you must have a good storyline, because even if you have good sidekicks and villains, a poor storyline will undermine the film. So I need a piece of evidence, and my evidence here would be using Atlantis. Atlantis has good sidekicks and villain, but it's a story, if you've ever watched it, it's really incoherent, and it's a bit all over the place, so it undermines the film. Next, sidekicks. I've put a substantially important, and my evidence here would be something like Olaf in Frozen, because I think he helps make Frozen and is actually potentially stronger than the main characters. And I could also use the genie in Aladdin, who's probably the strongest character in that film. And then lastly, I don't think villains are that important. I think the storyline and sidekicks is more important. And I could use the example of a villain, though, that does help make a film would be something like Jafar in Aladdin, or I don't know, Randall in Monsters Inc. Now, over here, for those who do not care about Disney, I've got a different idea or a different style question. For the 2018 to 19 season, assess whether the winning the domestic league makes a successful season. So we're going to go back to what I've asked us to do. Number 1, command word. 2, key factor. 3, key geographical phrase. 4, plan out my other 2 factors. So command word number 1, assess. Number 2, key factor. They've told me to talk about the domestic league. That's my key factor. My key phrase, or obviously in geography with geographical, a key phrase here is make a successful season. So they want me to keep going back. So number 1, they want me to ask, they want me to say, how far do I agree that a domestic league, winning the domestic league, makes it a successful season for a club? I need to come up with 2 other ideas that makes a club successful season in the 2018 to 19 year. So another one could be the amount of trophies you win. And a third idea could be the style of the football, okay, that a club plays. At the bottom here, you can see that I've already ranked them. Obviously, you'll be doing this in your head or planning it out before you start writing it. I did that before we started this. So number 1, I've put trophies, and I think trophies are significantly important to a club's whether a club has had a successful season. And my evidence here would be Man City. Man City have won the treble, first men's club in England to ever do that. I think that is a critical piece of evidence to explain why I think that trophies is significantly important at stating if a club has had a successful 2018 to 19 season. Next one, I've put as the second most important winning the domestic title. And I'm going to put that as Quite substantial. I do think it's substantially important to measure if you've had a successful season is if you've won your domestic or your country's main league. Obviously, I could refer to Man City here, and I could say, well, Man City have won the league plus 2 cups. But I could also say that the reason why I didn't give the domestic title being more important than trophies is because some domestic leagues are easier than others. Juventus have won the Serie A. They've won it before the last game of the season. They are 13 points ahead of Napoli. And they've also just announced that the coach, the manager who has won the league for them again, Allegri, has just been told he is not going to be managing the club next season. I think that undermines and shows you that actually we can't judge a successful season just based upon winning the domestic title because you can still lose your job. Okay, it's not good enough in the eyes of the Juventus board. Last one, style. I think style's pretty important, but not as important as winning a actual league or an actual trophy. But people remember matches in which clubs have performed particularly well, and I'm going to say it's only slightly important, but my evidence here would be that many of us who watched the 4-0 Liverpool against Barcelona match at Anfield will remember that for years to come. And that shows that the football being coached by Klopp at Liverpool is particularly memorable and could be used to show that Liverpool have had a particularly successful 2018-2019 league season. And obviously we're still to find out if they're going to win the Champions League. So there we go. This is me visualizing how I weigh up and think about the 3 factors for every assessed question. Now, obviously, that wasn't geography, and I'm going to come back to the geography of that in a little bit. Moving on. Back to the PowerPoint then. So last little bit on assess here, and this is from the exam board. This idea of a hidden agenda, okay? And think about that. When you get into the exam, when you get to the, if you see an assessed question, think about the hidden agenda. Many assess and evaluate questions have hidden factors or causes. Although the subject, and the subject is the key factor, which we've just discussed, is stated in the question, other subjects, other factors are relevant to the answer. Just like what we've done here, it only asked me to talk about the villain, but I've brought in 2 other factors, the hidden factors. Here, it talks about just domestic league, but I've brought in trophies and style. So that's the hidden factors. And the exam board said that weaker students were struggling to see this. So just because it asks you to talk about one factor doesn't mean you don't bring in your own subject knowledge. You must bring in 2 ideas of your own. And this is again from the exam board. Strategies for tackling assessed questions is that they have multiple factors. Although one of these may be stated in the question, many others are relevant to the answer. It is important that students see this to get level 3. So, assess the environmental impacts of exploiting Indonesia's energy resources. So you need to use several points with evidence, a well-balanced answer considering a range of impacts, and you must have a judgment. So if you do my structure, you will tick off 1, 2, terrible tick, and 3. You will tick these 3 off, which is what the exam board is after. Lastly, this is the level descriptor. So this is level 3, 7 to 8 marks. And you can see it says you must have a balanced, well-developed argument leading to judgments supported by evidence throughout. And that is the Peel structure that I've just gone through. Okay, do that 3 times with a conclusion, and you are allowing yourself to get into level 3. Even if you wrote excellent geography. If you did not follow that structure, you will not get into level 3. Okay, evaluate. Before I go on, I spoke quite a bit. I'm just going to have a quick drink. Okay. Evaluate is used for extended writing questions in which the student must appraise things by measuring the value or success of something and ultimately come to a definite judgment or conclusion. Okay. So they want you to do this structure, and we've taught you this in class. So to answer evaluate, you're making an argument. That's all evaluate actually means, okay? So we've got a posh word here for argument. We want you to read the question and think, what have I been taught that would allow me to take the question and split it into two sides of an argument? So you're going to have one side and the other side. We want you to follow this structure. One side of your argument on one hand, other side of your argument on the other hand, then you're going to bring it together in a conclusion and say overall. So if I was to read your evaluate questions, I would go, ooh, that's good. Because you went O for on one hand, O for on the other hand, O for overall. So we're going to go on one hand, on the other hand, and then overall here. And you must do a conclusion. So it's paragraph 1, paragraph 2, and then your third paragraph. Not one sentence, not two sentences. I need a chunky, proper, full third paragraph. And here you succinctly summarize the evidence you presented for both sides. Do not bring in any other new ideas. It has to be what you've provided. You make a substantiated judgment as to which side you are on and why. You must say why. Justify your decision. Again, can we use a reflexive point at the start of each paragraph? So, however, on one hand, okay, nevertheless, on the other hand, it looks a little bit nicer to the examiner. And then lastly, for evaluate, you must use the peel structure like we do for assess. I need point, evidence, explanation, and link. And on the other hand, point, evidence, explanation, link. So we must have peel for on one hand for paragraph 1, peel on the other hand for paragraph 2. And evidence, again, is either resource-based, if provided, or mainly it's your case study knowledge. Use specific facts. Okay, so to help you make an argument, look at the question and think about these options in front of you. So what you could do is look at the question and think, what are the costs? That could be one side of your argument versus the benefits. That could be the second side of your argument. So that could be on one hand, on the other hand. On one hand, the costs are, on the other hand, the benefits are. Or you could just go on one hand, the advantages are, on the other hand, the disadvantages are. Or on one hand, the strengths are, on the other hand, the weaknesses are. Or this is more advanced, and this would look more technical to the examiner if it is works appropriate to the question. You could say on one hand, okay, this is in the short term versus on the other hand in the long term. So it might be, for example, if this was Hurricane Katrina, in the short term, their responses weren't particularly good, but in the long term, they are particularly good. It could be that you're looking at the scale. So it could be that, I don't know, you're talking about the impact of an event, and we could be saying that it was on the small scale versus the large scale. So, this would only impact a local area. However, this would impact a larger area, a global area. Okay, global would be much worse than just impacting a local area. It could be that you're looking at it in terms of players. So could you take rich versus poor, or local resident versus CEO? Those could be the two sides of your arguments, two different players or groups of players. And then you could just use elements of SEEP, okay? And what I mean by SEEP is social, economic, environmental, political, geography, and you could just take two elements of that. So one side could be how it impacts or is good, however you want to term it, socially versus politically, or economically versus environmentally. And lastly here is another list, and you might want to pause it here, of other options. Just to point out here, you could think about it as reversible versus non-reversible. If something's non-reversible and permanent, that's much worse than reversible. Lastly here is the 8-mark evaluate mark scheme, and you must follow my on the one hand, on the other hand, overall, peel paragraph, substantial conclusion with a judgment of which side you're on. Can't sit on the fence to get into level 3. If you don't do that, you cannot get 7 or 8 marks. And you can see it says a balanced, well-developed argument leading to judgments that are supported by evidence throughout. Follow the structure, you can allow yourself to get into level 3. Perfect geography, no structure, you're not getting level 3. And this is from the exam board, and you can see that they're saying that it's a case study question which requires students to use evidence from what they've studied. That is the evidence you're providing in each peel paragraph. They have bolded that you must come to a definitive judgment and conclusion. If it asks you to use a resource, you must use the resource. And here they've given you some ideas of how to make the arguments, just like I did. And down here we've got a question. Evaluate the ways that the challenges of rapid urbanization have been managed to improve the quality of life. So again here, you would read that and think, right, they want me to talk about managing rapid urbanization. So you could say that it's managed well, so beneficially, against not well, so costs. That's one argument you can make. Another argument you can make is about how they've done it in the short term versus the long term, or maybe how it's been managed well for particular players and maybe not well managed for particular players. So well managed versus not well managed for players. It could be that you're thinking about how it's been good socially maybe, but not so good for the environment. So social versus environmental geography. You could be saying that in some ways it's sustainable and in some ways it's unsustainable. It might be that you could say on the small scale, okay, in certain areas of the city it's been done well, and actually on a larger scale in the vast majority of the city it has not been done well. So there's multiple arguments you can make with these evaluate questions, but you have to follow the structure. I would personally pick an argument that I know I've got case study knowledge that I could use for both sides. Okay, that's the PowerPoint presentation done. I think we're probably moving over an hour into this. Let me have a quick check. Yeah, we're over an hour in. So I'm going to try and move quite quickly through the last little bit. It's probably going to take me another 20 minutes. I'm going to go through some of the exam questions and model some of these to you. So we've done kind of explain and suggest already. We've spoke through assess and evaluate, but there's a few other types of questions I want to just pick up upon. Okay, for this, we're going back to the visualizer. My hair is looking a wee bit messy. All right. Okay. Let's lean back a bit. All right, here we go. Okay, I've circled some of the questions and I just would like to talk these through and then we'll finish up. Okay, first one here is just a little bit on multiple choice questions, and that's just to point out that at the top here it tells you what to do if you mess up which one you think is the correct answer. So it says that you put a cross in the box here, but if you change your mind about an answer, you just put a line through it like this. All right, and then you mark your new answer with a cross. Okay, so down here then, let's say, oh, I went for C. Then I realized no, that's not right. Put a line through it, and then I put an X in the one that I think is the correct answer. That is the correct answer. That would be 1 mark. It's given you a resource. If it gives you a resource and it tells you to study it, the answer here is in this resource. Use it. Okay, we've gone through that explain question. Okay. Now, here we've got a describe question, and it's worth 3 marks, and it says describe. So always underline our command words, and describe means we can't explain. So I want no explanation at all. Do not do it. I do not need any key phrases. No key phrases. We are not using this leads to, this means that, or as a result. For 3 marks, you use the resource. It says analyze, okay? And it's giving you loads of information here. We've got the mean carbon dioxide parts per million here, and it's given me the amounts. Here, it's told me the years before present. That's today going back in time. I've got mean temperature up the side here. They've given me loads of data, and I've got 2 different line graphs here. It asks me to describe the trends between these 2 here. This is where you need to think. If you get anything about distribution, patterns, trends, and that's what trend means. It's asking you to describe the patterns in the actual graph. This is where you think T, okay, which you've been taught in class, all right, which is where we're looking for the trends, you give some examples, and you give some anomalies. That could get you 3 marks. Or, simply put, you describe 3 trends, okay, 3 patterns in the data, and it tells you that you must use numeric data. So to get more than 1 mark, you must be seeing about 3 trends, 3 patterns using this data. Here's an example. This is from the exam board. They release yearly student responses and why they got the marks they gained. And this here is a student response last summer to this question. So they both follow the same pattern. As the mean CO2 rises, the mean Antarctic temperature rises. That gets 1 mark, okay? That's the general trend. Now, they wouldn't get any more marks without using specific data. 25,000 years ago, when the CO2 level was low, at about 187 parts per million, the Antarctic temperature was low at -9 degrees. So, second trend, and it's got data, 2nd mark. Third, now, that's present day, as the CO2 level has risen to 390 parts per million, the Antarctic temperature has risen by 5 degrees. So they're making a trend between the 2 line graphs on the resource, and they've used data from the resource. Take 3 marks, 3 out of 3. Make sure you get 3 trends and you back it up with data from the resource. Next question. So I'm just going through the exam here to help. We've done these. All right, this one here, all right, is worth 3 marks, and it's explain. So I'm going to underline the command word, explain one way in which global atmospheric circulation determines the location of high rainfall, low pressure areas. First off, ignore this bit for now. If you get a 3 mark explain question, the structure is you make your initial point, you're going to develop it into your second point, and then you're going to develop it again. So by develop, I mean use a key phrase, which is this leads to, this means that, as a result. Key phrase again, which are the same, this leads to, this means that, as a result. So you're going to go initial point, key phrase, and that develops it into your second point. Then you're going to develop it again using the key phrase, which makes your third point. You must do that to get 3 marks. You can't do 3 different points, like point, different, point completely, different, point completely. It's point, developed, developed. Now, interestingly, if it asks you to use a diagram, and I'll show you one from the exam board here. If it asks you to use a diagram, which this student has, you can get all 3 marks with it annotated, which means labeled with some explanation. You can get 3 marks on this question with just the diagram. This question, which is really tricky in terms of the wording, and I would say there, everyone, if you get a question and it just completely throws you, remember, think quickly. What topic are you on? Which section? I'm on hazardous earth. So you know it's on hazardous earth. You can get rid of all the other stuff you've been taught. So for this question, if you're thrown, think, I'm on hazardous earth. Okay, hazardous earth has 2 parts to it: tectonics and tropical storms. It's talking about global atmosphere. It can't be tectonics. It's nothing to do with tectonic plates, earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis. So we're limiting, we're reducing down, minimizing what this question could be about. It has to be something about tropical storms. So go through that process and then say to yourself, what could they be asking me from something I've been taught? It has to be something you've been taught. Nothing's been missed. It's something you've been taught on tropical storms. What could it be? And this question was horribly worded, but it was asking students to talk about the Hadley cells. Okay. And in the question that has use a diagram, you can get 3 out of 3 with a labeled diagram. This here, from the exam board, this is worth 3 out of 3. That's good enough. And the exam board say you don't have to write anything. If this is good enough and this gets you 3 out of 3, you don't have to write. So if you're a student who struggles with writing about some of the harder key geographical concepts like circulation cells, a well-labeled diagram can get you the marks. And the exam board said, don't waste time writing out what you've put here. So if this here is just you describing your drawing, then it's not going to get you the extra marks and you're wasting time. And that was a big thing from the exam board. Don't waste your time on a question like this repeating information. Okay? If this is additional information, good. If not, don't do it. Okay, back to the exam. So, all right. Here we've got G and we've got an evaluate the question. Evaluate the effectiveness of the methods of a response to a tropical storm in a named developed country. So it's an evaluate. I'm going to underline that, which means it's OO, and I'd ask you to do this in the exam as well. OO means I need to make 3 paragraphs. I'm going to have paragraph 1 on one hand, paragraph 2 on the other hand, and then paragraph 3 is going to be overall, where I decide which side I'm on. On one hand is going to be Peel, and on the other hand is going to be Peel. E is going to be evidence from my case studies. This is asking me about evaluate the effectiveness of methods of response to a tropical storm in a named developed country. Tropical cyclone means tropical storm. It's the same thing. So this is asking me about my case study on Hurricane Katrina. So I need to make an argument about on one side, on the other side, about how they responded to it. Now, I haven't looked at this properly, but this is from the exam board. Okay. So I can see here that this student has made one side of an argument. He's got on one hand, and then he's got a other side of the argument, and he's used a reflexive phrase and alternatively. We've taught you to use on the other hand. Okay. And me just skimming through this, I'll highlight it. I can see that this student is referring to key case study knowledge. Okay. And then at the end, he's made a judgment there. Okay. He's linked back to the question and he's made, or he or she, sorry, have made a judgment okay, back to the exam question. They've linked it back to that key phrase here about methods of response. However, I think the way that we've asked you to do it in terms of linking back and saying how important the point is better than this judgment. But you must make a judgment. You must say how important the point is. That's the S, the snake, the significance, just like an assess. Say how important it is back to that exam question, back to the key vocab. All right, down here, alternatively, again, I can see that they are quoting specific facts. A 6-meter surge here, $100 billion, $14 billion. And here we've got a judgment. There's their judgment. They've made a judgment about how important the point is, linking it back to the key phrase here, which is methods of response. And lastly, they've not used overall, but they've used in conclusion, and they've made an overall judgment of 2 to 3 sentences. Okay, I actually would like us probably to be doing a proper paragraph. I think your conclusion should be this big. Okay, back to the exam, and we've not got that many left to go through. Okay, I'm just going to stop here on this calculate question. I'm just going to point out here that it's worth 2 marks, and read the question carefully. It asks you to do it to 1 decimal place. Don't drop marks by not doing that. And it says show you're working. If you just wrote the answer, you'd get 1 out of 2. You must show you're working to get the 2nd mark. Okay, don't drop easy marks. All right, moving on. Okay, they like to add one of these questions in this paper, and you are going to get one of these questions. It says describe, again, underline the command word. It's not explained, so no explanation is needed. Don't do it. And do not use no key phrases. We don't need this leads to, this means that, or as a result. Describe, we've got some data here. Describe another data presentation technique. Posh, long phrase for a form of graphs, which could be used to show the changing rural and urban populations in China in figure 5. So this is it. Figure 5, here's the table, and we've got some information. What these questions are going to do is they'll give you a table like this of information, and they'll ask you, what would be a good graph to put that into? Okay, so you're going to get 1 out of 2 by just writing what type of graph you would put it into. All right, so a bar graph could be used. That would get you a mark. Now, the 2nd mark here, that's 1 out of 2, you can get in 2 ways. First way, describe what that bar graph would look like. So a bar graph could be used, and then you would say that you would have 1 bar showing changing rural population and another bar showing changing urban population. So you don't explain, you just literally describe what that bar graph would look like. Or number 2, you can get the 2nd mark by drawing it. So if you just sketched out very quickly what it would look like, that is awardable as 2 out of 2. So if you would struggle trying to explain in 4 sentences no explain, if you would struggle describing what the bar graph would look like, you could sketch it out very quickly. For any of those watching this and thinking you've got no idea about what graph you would use, if you go to just go to BBC Bite Size and go to Geography Edexcel, and BBC Bite Size is another revision tool here, but it's got a really nice geographical skills section. We've got on the YouTube channel, we've got a playlist on geographical skills, which I highly recommend everyone watches all of these before their exams. But The skills section here is nice. There's a bit on fieldwork skills. Do that 100% before paper 2. There's a bit on cartographic skills, graphical skills, maths here, and then quantitative and qualitative. That's for fieldwork as well. This is actually the best revision material for skills. I would recommend for paper 1, you do cartographic, graphical skills, and numerical skills. But if you click graphical, here it goes through all the different types of graphs, okay, that might appear in the exam, and also that you could say in this type of question, this one here, you could say to convert that data into. And like all of Bite Size, there's a test that you can do to check your understanding. And doing retrieval practice like this, checking your knowledge, is key to seeing if you've actually applied it to your long-term memory. So make sure you've done on Bite Size, hit Excel, have a look at this section here on geographical skills. Okay. All right. This is on to, I think, section C now. And just want to point out here, you get a question like this. Okay, it says study it. Make sure you spend time just getting your head around the resource. The answers are kind of, clues are in there. So a couple of questions I wanted to pick out here. So this one here, I've got a describe question, and this should be a nice 3 marks. So like we've said, we underline the command word describe. And I've got a describe the location of Sunderland's central business district shown in figure 6. 3 marks. So describe, no explanation needed. You're not going to get any marks for it. So I want no key phrases. Don't need it. To get 3 marks on a describe the location question, you need to give 3 descriptions, and they must be very specific geographical descriptions. And it's telling us to use figure 3. So it tells me here the central business district is this blue oval. Here it is. Okay, so that's Sunderland CBD. It wants me to know or to say where is it in Sunderland. Okay, now they've given me compass directions. Wink, wink, use it. They've given me scale. Wink, wink, use it. Okay, I can see the River Wear. Wink, wink, use it. I can see the new Weir crossing. You get the point. A19 motorway. I can see a beach here. So I've got the coast. This is the sea. Use this in your answer. So I'm going to go that the CBD, Sunderland's CBD, is south of the River Weir. Okay. It is located east of the coastline, North Sea. Let's go back. And I can see that I've used the River Weir, I've used the coastline here, and I could probably say it is also located, I don't know, southeast of the Nissan car plant. It is southeast of the Nissan car plant. I could have potentially, instead of using just compass directions, I could have said that it was located probably about 500 to maybe 1,000 meters, okay, from the coastline. But you must use the compass directions, the scale, and the names of places provided to you to get the marks here. Just to point out, I used to work in the Nissan car plant, and I used to live here. All right, so here, basic describe question. 1 mark, 2 mark, 3 mark, 3 out of 3. 3 descriptions using the information on the resource. Next one, we've got a suggest question. So again, I underline my command word. 2 factors, 4 marks. Suggest is like explain. So I need times 2 developed points. I need 2 developed points. So I'm going to have 1 developed point here, 2nd developed point here. And it's asking me to look at figure 6. Remember, suggest always uses a resource. You quote from the resource and you explain it. So here's the suggested site, and I can see all of this is urban area. It has been built on. This is not, okay? So I'm lifting my initial point from the resource. So I'm going to use the language of the question. 1 factor is that the site, so the site is where it's going to be built, is greenfield. It's not urban, it's not reused, deprived, derelict, urban area, i.e. brownfield. 1 factor is that the site is greenfield, and then I must develop it. This means that it has been chosen as the land is relatively cheaper. So highlight my key phrase. I've got 1 point, tick, and I've suggest question, so I've taken that from the resource. Figure 6, it's told me to do that. 1 fact is that the site is greenfield. Developed point using key phrase. This means that it has been chosen the land is relatively cheaper. Tick. Next, go back to the resource. What else can I see? Why else might they have chosen to build it here? I've got a motorway right beside it. It's running all the way to the south here. So, another factor is that the A19 motorway is located to the east of the site. There's 1 point from the resource. I need to develop it. As a result, key phrase, as a result, it will be easier to transport produced goods for sale. Here we go again, key phrase, as a result, ticket, point from the resource, developed it from the point of the resource to get 4, 4 out of 4, 2 factors, developed to get my full marks. Just want to skip back 1. So just to point out, I missed this. The second 8 marker, so section B on this paper, there's 3 8 markers, 1 for each section, but the second one has an additional 4 marks for spelling, punctuation, grammar, and use of specialist terminology. This is very important for you just to double check, go back through, make sure that you that sentences read grammatically correct. You know when it doesn't read correctly. Just double check punctuation, especially on place names. Names of businesses need to be capitalized. Start the sentences need to be capitalized. You need to have your full stops there. Have a scout through for like common spelling mistakes, like missing out the N in the middle of government and environment. And then lastly, have a look at your answer. Is there anywhere you could upcycle your terminology? So if you're sat there for the last 5 minutes and you're finished, look at your words in this question. Could you take a word like, I don't know, if you wrote a sentence such as, this means that more people lose their lives, you could upcycle that to, this means that there is an increase in increase in death rate. Okay, so switch, if you can, switch some wording to try show the examiner that you're using more specialist geographical terminology to try get some additional marks here. Last one, and we're done. is last question on this paper was a assess question. So I underline my command word that I taught you to do that first. Second thing I said is to find the key factor. Now, there's no key factor here. It just states what the factor is, which is different strategies. Third thing I said for you to do is to find the key phrase. There it is, improve sustainability. And fourth thing I said for you to do is to go to your key factor. Now, I don't have one this time. I've just been told what I should use, what my factors should be on. So my factors must be on different strategies. So I need 3 strategies. So I'm making my plan here. So the question is, for a near megacity, you've only ever been taught one, Mumbai. So for Mumbai, assess 3 strategies in terms of whether they've improved the sustainability in Mumbai. So that could be economically, environmentally, politically, socially, however you deem it. So every single point here, 1, 2, 3, I'm linking back to how far do I agree that that point, that strategy, that factor has improved sustainability. So I could go with the monorail in Mumbai. I could use Slum Aid in Mumbai, and I could use the Gorai garbage site closure project. And I'm very quickly going to do that, what I did earlier, this graph here. I'm going to do this in my head. I'm going to say that this is the best. This here, I'm going to say that this was extremely significant sustainably. I'm going to say Slum Aid is the second best. I'm going to use substantially sustainable. I need to keep linking it back to sustainable. And the monorail, well, I don't think that was particularly good. I'm going to say slightly. And that's going to be slightly. That's going to be first. I'm going to say this is second. This is third. So my first point, I'm going to start with Gorai. That's my most important. And I'm going to do a peel paragraph. Point, evidence from my case study knowledge. Explain it. And I'm going to link it back to the question. So I'm going to link it back to the phrase improve sustainability. I'm going to use that in my link back to the key phrase, key geographical phrase. And when I link it back, I'm going to measure how significant the point is and make a sentence or two judgment. I think this is extremely important at improving sustainability because of the long-term positive environmental impacts of this project. So remember, we're going back to this peel aspect here, this peel. And then number 2, second most important, I'm going to say that this is Slum Aid. I'm going to do peel. And again, I'm going to link back to the key geographical phrase, improving sustainability. I'm going to make a judgment. I'm going to say substantially. I'm going to state why. Third one, least important, in my opinion, is monorail. I'm going to do a peel paragraph. And I'm going to link back. I'm going to say, I think that this strategy was slightly important at helping to improve the sustainability of Mumbai because, and I'm going to use here, I'm going to say that scale-wise, it only helped a small area of Mumbai geographically. It didn't go to all areas of the city. And then my fourth paragraph is I'm going to make a conclusion where I make a quick overall judgment, okay, about how good have the strategies been at making Mumbai more sustainable. Okay, that is it. Okay, I hope that's been helpful. See ya.